Welcome to Lead Your Life, the podcast for people who are seeking harmony in business and in life. My name is Debbie Heiser, and I'm an inner mastery and business mindset coach and the chief igniter here at the Lit Up Life. I feel an urgency to help people let go of past messaging so that they can make a lot of money doing what they love without sacrificing what they value most. Welcome. We're glad you're here.
Straight from the corners of my mind is where I find my sanity. It's a place, another land.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Lead Your Life with Debbie Heiser. My name is Debbie Heiser, and in this world today, I've been really trying to focus on gratitude, and so want to express my gratitude to you for listening, for showing up today, whatever day it is that you're listening, and I just so appreciate that you've allowed me into your journey to talk about things that are important to me. This month, we've been looking at this idea of kind of owning, having a deep knowing, and then owning what it is that we want and trusting that what we want is possible. So many times I hear people say that they want something, but then they don't either have the trust in themselves or they don't believe it's really going to happen. And so, as a matter of fact, I was talking to a client the other day and we were talking about something that she said she really wanted. And I asked her a question about having a plan in place. And she said, no, I don't have a plan in place for that. And it was very specific around debt. And some debt is good debt. Like debt is not bad. We have this idea that debt is bad. But as we were looking at it, one of the things that we realized is that she was kind of not thinking about it, hoping it would go away. And so this idea of having a plan is this idea of feeling like then she has some authentic action to go forward with what she's doing. And so she wanted to do something. She had this desire to pay off debt, but yet she didn't have a deep knowing because she didn't understand the whole situation she was in, and she wasn't trusting based on authentic action that it would happen. And there's a story or a parable that's out there, and it comes, I believe, from somewhere in the Old Testament. I need to look this up, where they were experiencing a huge drought, and this prophet comes to town, and people are like, why is this happening? Why are we not getting any rain? And he basically says to them, because you're not expecting it. Because back in those days, water was precious. So they had water pots that they put outside their front doors or the back doors. I don't really know, but they put them outside to collect the rain. And because they'd been in a drought so long, people were not putting out the rain pots. And so the prophet basically said, you have to expect it, right? Like you have to expect that it's going to happen. Now, the key to this is realizing that sometimes we get so tied to the outcome that we're blinded. I explained this in this joke that I heard years ago around a man was, approaching his higher power, passing over, and says, why didn't you save me? Right? He was drowning. And his higher power said to him, oh, you mean the inner tube I sent you and the paddleboard and the kayak? That's proving a point of we get so tunnel visioned into what we think the outcome should be, and we get so tied to that outcome that then when things are coming into our life to help us do what it is we want to do, from either lack of trust or believing it needs to be one way, we then can't receive it. We deflect it. And I suggest to people to start becoming aware of when you deflect this. In the realm of abundance comes in all ways, right? And we're not talking about abundance today. We're going to talk about the law of perpetual transmutation of energy, but this is a key component of this because part of this is around receiving. And I want you to just notice, does somebody try to open a door for you and you say, oh, no, thank you, I've got it. Or they try to buy you coffee and you either argue with them or say, no, I've got my own. or like trying to be this like rugged individualist, like where does that show up? And I'm not saying that in judgment, but it's messaging that we've gotten that we have to do it all ourselves, and that's just not the case. So I want you to notice, and sometimes it feels uncomfortable. And I say to people, hey, you know what? Thank you so much. That was not expected in any way, shape, or form, but so appreciated. So, thank you. And that's helped me get over my uncomfortability and made me realize how many times I've shut off having something come to me. So, in that realm, I want to dig into this law of perpetual transmutation of energy, because having a deep knowing about something and then trusting. So knowing and trusting what you want is possible is so key to all of these laws, but I'm just picking two that kind of center on that this month. And if you haven't listened to the previous one about the law of divine oneness, feel free to go back. They're separate, but um, this law of perpetual transmutation of energy, basically it says that substance can be transmuted, but it can't ever be destroyed. Because if you think about energy and you think about neurons and protons, that energy can never be destroyed. It just changes. So if it can't be destroyed, and I think of our energy somewhat as like our mind, right? Some people will say their soul. I think the mind is a combination of our heart, our soul, and our brain power, right? The neurotransmitters that we have in the neuroscience area. But when you think about that, substance can't be transmuted, but it can be transmuted, but it can never be destroyed. So it can change, it can morph, right? There's all sorts of entertainment out there where things are morphing. I think of Transformers, right? But like it can never be destroyed. This energy can't. So I also think about our essence, right? Like our spirit that a lot of people call spirit, like it can't be destroyed. And so when you think about that as far as energy, and some people get a little caught up in this because energy also comes to us in the form of an idea. And then we take those thoughts. So part of this is about the mind, because the mind is our essence and it's what we're really made of. It includes our thoughts. I've mentioned that, our heart, our intuition, our foresight, along with physical reactions that are caused from our mind. It is scientifically proven that if somebody has cold hands and you just think about your hands warming up, they will in fact warm up because the blood flow starts to increase, because our minds are so powerful. Our minds are also infinite. They're super expansive and so incredibly powerful. And so when we think about this idea of things being transmuted and we have a thought or an idea come into our mind, we have the capability to transform that into form. So, I want to go to Elon Musk as an example, right? He had this idea. He wanted a car that fit his large family in. I think there's 6 of them. And he wanted it to be electric and economical. And he wasn't too worried about the how. Now, I get he has a lot of money. And so some people roll their eyes and it's like, well, because he's got a lot of money. Well, that money came to him because of other things that he's done with ideas and brought into form. But the point here is that he didn't worry about the how, but he knew he wanted to create this. So he then starts to attract other people and the how starts to unfold, right? So that's part of the faith that comes in this, part of the spiritual piece of this. So, and you see that all over the place. Like I think about our local Evans Brothers coffee. I love their coffee and I love their Sandpoint store. It's just so awesome. And the Evans brothers are just so, like, I'm giving them a big shout out. So if you're listening to this and you know them, tell them I'm shouting out to them because they give back so much to our community. They're just great. But they're sitting on a chair. I think it was chair 6 up at Schweitzer, and they both kind of, the way they tell it is that they have this conversation that they realize Sandpoint really needed a coffee roastery. They needed someone locally that was doing coffee. So they created this idea, and then they took the idea, put inspired action to it. So they listened to their minds, their thoughts, they listened to their heart, they listened to this like spiritual DNA that they were born with this like identity of like, when I say true identity, like what they were called to do, their vocation. And they listened to themselves And so created this whole model that now they go directly to the coffee bean producer in different countries, and they buy straight from them. They roast their own coffee, and they have these phenomenal coffee drinks, right? And their drip coffee is phenomenal, and their espresso. So that's an example of where they took an idea and then they created substance in it. They created a physical state of it. So it's transmuted. It can't ever be destroyed. And what happens in the transmutation is the fact that substance is constantly going from a formless state to a physical state and back again. Right? Let's think about back in the day, someone had an idea for transportation, something easier than a horse. And early on, it was probably on taming horses or whatever. But so they create the wheel. The wheel then is created into bicycles, it's created into wagons. Then someone has another idea that creates a physical state that then creates from this idea of transportation into a vehicle that's powered by gas. Then we have someone that creates a bus, they create trains, from electricity, then they create cars that have electricity, right? Like, so all of these things are going into a physical state, and then they go back sometimes, right? So, and what I mean by that is sometimes things disappear. I think about, I'm aging myself here, but I'm thinking about how much I've seen in my lifetime, right? And the fact that, I mean, I grew up and there was no such thing as a microwave until later in my childhood. There was no such thing as a cell phone. We had telephones with big, huge, long cords that we would take into the hallways and down into our bedrooms. We didn't even have cordless phones. We had also, when it comes to like being able to take mobile music with you, it was pretty much the radio. MTV comes out, starts doing videos on TV. Then all of a sudden we have Walkmans, right? Like CD players that we can take with us because CDs came out. We had little like remote radios you could take with you. But the point being is like, even that has progressed into a physical form, and then it shifts into a digital form, and so it's constantly moving, it's constantly changing, and it's the progressive creation operation of the universe, God, whatever you want to place there, right? So when I think about this law of perpetual transmutation of energy, it goes back to the statement that I love to make, where it's easier to move a moving cart than it is one standing still, because the energy has already started to move. Let's face it, sometimes as an entrepreneur and a business leader, we need some guidance, support, and community. So we here at The Lit Up Life have 3 ways that you can work with us in order to achieve that. As a private client, we work together to quantum leap your business by discovering strategies to help you move past what's holding you back and allow you to identify what you want your life to look like. The result? Your business becomes the conduit to the lifestyle, success, and impact that you intend. Now, I'm a huge believer in the power of collaboration. So in our community masterminds, you can join in with other high vibrational business owners who want to level up, increase impact, and financial gain, all with a tribe of other women to support and encourage you on your journey. Currently, we're accepting application for this women's mastermind group, which is a year-long program for women in business who are ready for that next level of success. We create deep personal awareness in a safe and supportive space where you can experience growth with others who are on that same path. Through weekly sessions with our program coaches, teachings that go beyond the buzzwords, and immersive retreats in places like Mexico, the Dominican Republic, or Belize, we work together to create long-term abundance and lasting impact in your life and business. The last and final way to get involved with us is our group coaching programs. They provide the opportunity for teaching, masterminding, and feeling like you aren't alone on this ride. Come join us. Right? So there are some themes that fall underneath this law, and I've talked about some of them, but I want to discuss these a little bit more and how this works with this deep knowing and trusting. So if you know that substance can be transmuted and this energy can never be destroyed, that it goes from a formless state into form and back again at different times, for me, that opens it up and is empowering to think, oh, I could go make my desire what it is that I'm wanting to create in the world. I can make that happen. I have the ability to co-create that. And so it's really then taking those thoughts from your mind. And there's the universal law of thinking that is kind of a theme with this one that says, thought is invisible, but it is the mechanism of all creation. Like nothing is created without some thought, right? Like you have an idea pop into your head. And so it's the mechanism of all creation and the source of all conditions in our lives. So I've talked to some people before where they just say, like, I'm just waiting for the next shoe to drop because it feels like I have something happening to me constantly that's in this kind of spiral downward, right? And what happens is that couples in with the law of vibration, where, the condition of our lives, when we think about vibration, this is that owning that thought and owning that desire, owning that idea and trusting the thoughts that come to us. Like it took me a long time to get to the point where I trusted myself. It took me forever to make decisions. And then once I started to trust myself and realize I make pretty darn good decisions, and so in my evidence bank, I know I can throw coins in that evidence bank. Now, do I take risk? Absolutely. And my risk aversion has changed over time. I'm much more actively taking risk than what I did in my past, right? So this idea of the conditions of our life, it's about law of cause and effect. It's about law of vibration. It's about taking those ideas that we have. And how many of you have done this before? I've done this before. Years ago, before COVID, they used to have these magazines, and I see them starting to come out on the airlines where they had all these like inventions and all these like really cool things that you could purchase, right? And I thought, oh my gosh, how cool would that be to invent something to hook to your ski jacket that suctions your phone or hooks your phone in, so that if you're on the ski lift, because you got gloves on, you got poles, you got all this stuff. If you're a snowboarder, you don't have the poles. But the point being is you got all this stuff that you're trying not to drop. Hence why they have the old fashioned, when you were a kid, the little elastic bands for your mittens or your gloves. Skiers use that all the time because when we're on the lifts, we don't have to worry about them falling off the lift. So I have this idea of how cool would that be? Because there's so many times that it'd be a cool picture, or like I'd love to take my phone out and take a look at, and take a picture or take a video, do whatever. But I get a little nervous about that, and I don't want to, because I don't want it to fall out of my hands, because I also have a liner gloves on and they're a little slippery. And so I thought, how cool would that be, right? To have something that connects to your coat, connects to your phone, so that if you dropped your phone, it's still connected to you and you can just pull it up, right? And have it go. I kid you not more than it was less than a year. I'm back on an airplane and I'm looking through that magazine, and there sits the idea that came to my head about this like phone thing, right? So what happens too is we're given ideas, and if we choose not to create form out of that, that's fine. But the universe, or for me, God, like gives it to somebody else, right? Because it's wanting to come forward. And so that energy wants to come forward into substance. And so it's going to come from somewhere. And so sometimes it's a matter of understanding what your values are, what you're like, where you really want to go, so you don't take on everything and become overwhelmed, right? And I've had ideas that I keep in a little idea box that I'm going to do one day. And some of them I'm working on right now. And who knows, somebody might beat me to the punch, and that's okay, because it's meant to come forward, right? So this idea of that it's the creation and source of all the conditions of our life, right? And what we think, whether constructive or deconstructive or destructive, not deconstructive, geez, destructive, we create that. Right now, I get that there's a whole other conversation here about karma, depending on what you believe about karma, or, why does evil exist in the world? And some of that has to do with the law of polarity if you come from a Christian background. around the fact that it's not evil, but it's the absence of God, right? Or we don't see darkness. You don't see when it's dark. It's the absence of lightness. So anyway, there's that piece of it. There's other folks that believe in karma around like things that you're learning, and whatever you learned in your last past life, you're asking for something this life, whatever. I don't want to get into that huge conversation, but that's kind of this thought process around we're constructing or being destructive with what we create. And there aren't any exceptions to this. Energy comes into form, it leaves. I like to use water as somewhat of an example, right? Because you have steam, although that is still somewhat form, and water and ice, it can freeze, whatever. But that's kind of one that people can wrap their heads around. Now, aligned thoughts create aligned action or inaction based on our level of thinking. So if you have a desire and you have this deep knowing of something and you trust it, you create aligned actions. You know, somebody asked me one time, why did you get a teaching degree? And I said, honestly, there's a lot of things in my life that I'm not really sure the why behind. I just knew I was supposed to go do it. And so I got an education degree. When I signed up to get my master's, I had no idea, as embarrassing as this is, I had no idea where Gonzaga University was. I just knew that when I was doing research, they popped up as someone that did servant leadership. And that was intriguing to me. I did more research on servant leadership and said, that's the master's I'm supposed to have, is a master's in organizational leadership with an emphasis in servant leadership. And I went and did it. Now, those are things that came to me. I just knew it. It was like it was in like my spiritual DNA. And that's another theme here, right? Because each of us was born with a spiritual seed or DNA that has in its directive to grow and become the fullest expression of itself. So the desire for more is the universe's way of calling us forward into that actualization of our true identity and purpose. And so when I think about those things, they came with ease, right? When I moved to Idaho, it doesn't mean that there weren't some difficulties that came, but I knew. My husband and I at the time both just had this deep knowing that that's where we were supposed to be. Similar to I had accepted, someone purchased the company that I worked for. I had accepted a move to North Carolina. We both woke up at the same time in the middle of the night, and we looked at each other and we're like, what are we doing? We're not supposed to move. Right. So we have this like deep knowing. Now, it doesn't appear to everyone all the time like that. But this is this idea of that deep knowing and trusting based on our mind, based on the law of thinking, our soul, and that spiritual DNA. There's also the heart. And the heart, actually, the Heart Math Institute has a lot of research on this, that the heart, it shows the inner convictions, right? And it displays our intent. And basically, because whatever we think about and hold in our heart materializes. And that's that deep knowing. And the heart is actually a lot smarter even than the gray matter that we have. So it's really interesting as we go into that. And the last piece is really around the physical. So our mind, which is the essence of who we are, right? Our spirit and our thought processes, our heart, and that deep knowing that comes in our heart, our physical body actually expresses what's truly in the mind, right? And this is both in positive ways and in dis-ease, right? So when we're in dis-ease, we're disease, right? And there's a lot of things out there that point to how powerful our brain is in creating illness. Now, I don't want to I'm not going into this and saying people don't have true illness. That's not what I'm saying. But there's just a lot of things out there that I'm starting to tap into that talk a lot about this, and how, like, if you think about the placebo effect, that's an example of that, right? Like how the mind can help change this, epigenetics can help change some of this. So the physical body expresses that, and the conditions of the body are caused by the mind. And this is, I'm going to sneeze. Look, that's interesting. Ooh, excuse me. Combining the elements of the mind results in a physical form. So many of you may have heard me talk about Louise Hay. She has out there this alchemy, and you can heal your own body, about sometimes when things show up, there are psychological mind kind of things that are happening. And I've used the example of recently after my divorce, I decided I was going to do this fairly intense hike that we have here called Gold Hill. And I split it into thirds. The first third are these switchbacks that are kind of well, I don't want to say they're kind of a killer, but when you're out of shape, they're not easy. Even in shape, people have to rest. That's the first third. And then the second third is kind of a meandering through this forest area. And you kind of get psyched out thinking you're at the top and then realize you're not. And then there's this third part that's still a little bit meandering, but you can start to see that you're getting up to the top of this area. And it looks down over the mile-long bridge across the lake and river into Sandpoint. It's gorgeous. And you can see up the river. So I decide, come hell or high water, I'm going to go do that hike. So I go on the hike. Things are going well. I'm like, yeah, I can do this, right? It was kind of proving to myself, even though it was a path. My ex-husband was great about knowing where to go when you're not even on a path in the woods. He had this really uncanny way of knowing direction. I kind of miss that sometimes. But so I was on this path and I'm like, I am going to do this hike by myself because I want to prove to myself that I can do these things. And becoming newly single, that was important to me to do some things on my own. YouTube has become my best friend. I've learned how to do all sorts of things through YouTube that my husband used to do at the house. Anyway, not to get sidestepped here. I'm walking and I get past the switchbacks. I'm taking a rest on this bench, looking down to the east side of the lake towards Hope. And I'm sitting there and I thought, okay, I'm going to do this next section. It's going to go great. And it was a little hard because it had rained a week before and it was kind of slick in some areas. There were trees down that I had to go up and over. And, and I didn't always trust my balance after I shattered my tibia. My balance isn't always the best. And so there were a lot of things happening in my mind about this. So halfway into the second section, it's like all I can do to get my feet to move. My feet are hurting. It feels like I have cement blocks on my feet. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? And then literally 5 minutes later, it's like, woo, it's like I'm just like skipping through the forest, right? And this happened on and off throughout my walk. And then I got blisters. I usually always carry a pack with me that has moleskin in it or Band-Aids. I had none of those things. So I'm starting to get creative and I pull some moss. I stick moss in my sock and in my shoe to try to like stop the blister. I'd never gotten blisters with these shoes before. So needless to say, this goes on, right? All the way up to the top of the mountain. So I'm resting there looking and I'm looking down the river. And most of you don't know this. I don't like going down, which is so weird because I love downhill skiing. But when I'm going down, since I broke my leg, and I'm trying to change the story, so I'm being conscious of the words I'm using. But I used to hate going down. And when I would go down, my gait is just different. And it's sometimes a little painful because it like is hitting that area. I don't know why. It's been a story in my head and it's getting better as I'm releasing that story. So, but at that time I hadn't released that story. So I'm sitting up there and I see this huge rainstorm coming down the river towards me. And I'm like, you know what? I might as well just sit here and enjoy the view because I'm going to get wet either way. And I'm going to go sliding down some of these switchbacks. And I don't have my hiking poles with me. Like I didn't go prepared, which is so weird because I never do those kinds of things. So I know the universe is always looking out for me. And it was such a great experience because I learned to trust myself on that trail. So I'm coming down the trail. It is really slow go. So many trees were down. And in this one particular area, this tree root ball had come up and like covered the trail. And there was just the width of one shoe that you kind of had to go 3 or 4 steps on to get past this without going down into this huge root ball hole. Right. And I'm thinking, if I get in this hole with this slippery mud, I don't know if I'm gonna get out. So I get down to that thing, and it was like a 5-minute conversation with myself that I could do this. And I'm hanging on to this slippery tree. At this point in time, I don't care that my North Face jacket is getting mud all over it. I am like hanging on to the roots. I'm thinking, please, dear God, don't let these roots break. And the whole time coming down, too, my feet are going through the same experience that they went through before. I was so focused on getting through that one little section that it didn't even equate to me what my feet felt like, other than they were thin, right? Like I was believing they were thin and we were going to make it through the spot. I finally get down to the end, and I'm Kleenexing myself off to even get into my car, because at that time I had cloth seats. And I was like, wow, what is this all about? So I get home and I look up Louise Hay, and blisters stood for irritation with someone. Wonder who I was irritated with. A little bit with myself because I wasn't prepared, and a little bit with my ex-husband. And then foot pain or heaviness in your feet stood for this fear of moving forward, right? So this was recent after my divorce. I got divorced in January, and this would have been like March of 2020. And, at that time, it might have been April, we had been in the whole realm of COVID too. So I just found that really perplexing. And so thank you for listening to that story about kind of this idea of how the mind can create physical and these reactions within our body and our heart and our mind. And that all relates to this law of perpetual transmutation of energy in the realm of trusting and knowing, having a deep knowing that what you desire is possible. And with that, folks, my hope is that this empowers you to go out and really trust. And if you're struggling with that, that's kind of what I help people do, is unwind those things so that you can trust, so you can have that deep belief in yourself and moving forward into whatever it is that you're desiring. So check out the show notes, sign up for a clarity call with me. It's a non-pressure call. It's just more of really helping you get clear on what it is that you want in your life. So with that, folks, it's a wrap. Thank you so much again for listening. We'll chat again next week. Thanks so much. That's a wrap for this conversation. I'm so glad you've joined us. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you can catch all of our future episodes, and visit us at thelituplife.com for details on how you can become part of the Lit Up Life community. A quick shout out to my friend Jackie Wilson and her friends, the creators of our amazing theme music. Thanks so much for allowing us to share this perfect song with our listeners. Looking forward to having you listen in to our next episode.